All right, chapter 2, India. At one time, the whole world was one supercontinent called Pangaea. Now, we now know that the world was, all the land mass was one continent before, then the continents split, then the continents crashed together again, and then they split again. I have mentioned that. We know how South America fits right here into Africa, and North America fits right into Europe, and these Appalachian Mountains that begin right nearby here in Georgia are the same mountains range you find in Scandinavia. Broke off. Reason for that is the Earth sits on tectonic plates. Now, these plates eventually, where they come together, that's an earthquake zone. When these plates move, that's what causes earthquakes. Down below us is a whole lot of pressure. The land masses are floating. At one time we thought they were floating on lava, hot lava. That's partly true, but we now know that beneath the oceans that we see is a vast, vast ocean. Now, I've had pupils who don't believe this is a recent discovery, folk, and before you argue with it, look it up. We have a vast, vast ocean that down below the ocean that we see that might actually contain more water than the oceans above, the oceans that we can't see. But anyway, the Earth, the land masses sit on tectonic plates that occasionally move. Now, in our part of the story, India is unique in that it's the only one of the present day land masses. It started off down here, made the trip across the Indian Ocean, and bumped into another landmass. It bumped into the south side of Asia and pushed up the Himalayan mountains and continues to do so. That is why the Himalayan mountains are the world's tallest. The tallest mountain in the world is Mount Everest, and a lot of people make it their goal to climb Mount Everest, and a lot of people have died doing it. I hope I spelled that word right. Anyway, pushed up the Himalayan mountains. Now, the supercontinent was called Pangaea. Now, when it split up at one point, part of Africa, we had Africa and India were called Gondwan land, but I forget those details for now. I do want you to remember the name Pangaea, because the Pangaea comes from the Greek word pan, which means all-encompassing, or everything. Now, these Himalayan mountains, plus the fact that India is surrounded on two sides by water. I mean, India is in the shape of a triangle, so you might say India only has three sides, but it's surrounded on two sides by water, and on the third side, the north side, by super tall mountains. And this isolated India from the rest of the world. And when we study first semester world history, we're studying history in isolation. In other words, the families of the earth were in isolation from each other for many years. Then around the year 1500, all the different ethnic groups started finding out about each other and coming together. But during this period of time we're studying, India was largely isolated from the rest of the world. The first people we know about lived along the Indus River. Indus is a river in what is today Pakistan. It's called the Indus Valley. Indus Valley. Now, the big question here, the Indus Valley civilization was something that was discovered only about 60 or so years ago. I never heard about it when I was in high school, but I did bump into it my senior year of college. Then in graduate school I did a paper on the Indus Valley. It definitely had some contact with the Sumerians. Is it older than the Sumerians? That's impossible to tell. Anyway, the Indus Valley civilization was inhabited by the people we call Dravidians. And we do know just a little bit about them, but not much. The Dravidians left some writing, which we find on their brickwork that has survived, brick and stone etchings, but we cannot read it. Again, I can't emphasize enough, we cannot decipher an ancient text unless we find a stone that has three, like we did in the case of the Rosetta Stone, that had three languages, and we knew one of them, so we can find out the other two. Or unless we have lots and lots of text, like in the case of the Mayans, or in the case of the Greek Linear B, where you had lots and lots of text, and with a lot of text you can decipher a language. With just a few texts you can't decipher it, so we don't know much about the Dravidians. We do know that they apparently were black, and this is going to become very important later as we get into the story. But anyway, time went on. Eventually the Dravidian civilization came to an end. But while it was around, there were two cities. I mean, we have found several cities. Let's see, maybe we change it. Mohenjo. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Now, personally, I wonder if Harappa is not the errata that you should have read about in your before you took the last test. But Harappa, errata, to me, the two. But be that as it may, now these cities, along with some other ancient cities, have something we might think is very unique. Neither one of them have any buildings that might be called a palace or a temple. It appears that they probably had no king. You might wonder, well, what kind of government they have. Possibly what they had was a whole bunch of people living together in something that resembled an equality. But every once in a while they might meet in an assembly and appoint someone to be a leader, but the leader lived in his own private house and didn't live in a palace. And he was not tended to by servants, but they possibly had but we don't even know if they had a leader. There appears to have been no temples either. In other words, not that these people were not religious, but they did not spend a lot of lavish money. So instead, the average ordinary person lived on the same level, equal level to everyone else in the city. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that was good or bad. What my own personal take on it, though, is that at one time humanity was fairly equal. Then as time went on, some people remained equal and some people fell by the wayside intellectually and fell to ruin, and their descendants will remain in ruin for many generations. That's my personal take on it, but again, each of you can decide for yourself. Now, the main name Mohenjo-Daro, we don't know what. That was probably not its original name. In fact, I'm certain it wasn't. It means city of the dead. All right, now hold on to your seats for another ride. We found Mohenjo-Daro around 1922, thereabouts. Some explorers bumped into the city while looking. It was overgrown with jungle, and it looks like no one had been inside the city limits in probably 3,000 years. Maybe more like 35 or 3,600 years. Quite a long time ago. In a way of people, we didn't find any graves that we know of. We found about 42 bodies. The bodies had not been buried, but over time, over the course of that dust had covered them up until they recovered. A lot of the bodies were lying out in the street. And in some cases, the bodies were for instance, there was a woman who was trying to protect a child, and there was another body that was crouched down like he was trying to hide from an unexpected event. Now, this morning's class, we had quite a discussion about this. And again, always someone will say, was it a meteor? I have two serious problems with it being a meteoroid. meteoroids hit the Earth, it seems like they're hitting with more regularity now, but they hardly ever, I mean, okay, they don't target. In other words, if something hit the Empire State Building in New York City, or maybe let's say that something hit the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., I would suspect that it was not a meteoroid. Highly likely it was not. In other words, it was a guided missile source. The other problem with it is, if it had actually been a real meteor, supposing by chance a meteoroid hit in the center of Mohenjo-Daro, we should find tens of thousands of bodies, number one, and number two, the survivors would have come back into the city to take their wealth, maybe steal wealth from the dead, and at least try to bury their dead, and possibly rebuild. In the case of Mohenjo-Daro, not even the animals came back to eat the bodies that were left. Even the animals stayed away. There's no evidence of any kind of gnawing or chewing on the human bones that we find. We find almost no animal bones. All right. It does not suggest that the river overflowed. Again, if that had been the case, we've had floods throughout history, and most of the time when the flood is over, the survivors will come back in. What kind of a disaster would be so bad that even the animals would stay away and nobody would come and visit the place for more than 3,000 years?
Volcano eruption.
See, it sounds like Pompeii. In the case of Pompeii, again, like the meteorite, you have hundreds of bodies, multiply, actually somewhere in the thousands. That's good. That's not a bad guess. Folk, the most logical explanation is that it was targeted. Now, there is a written record. They wrote, backing up to it, the Hindus wrote their records in a language that's now forgotten about. Sanskrit, pardon me, it's not forgotten. It's no longer spoken. It's like Latin. It's like Sumerian. The Sumerian language